I got a strange going on out here. Something just killed my dog.
Something killed your dog?
Hey, everybody. Thank you so much for joining the Cryptid Podcast. I'm your host, Daniel. You guys, I have a treat for you tonight. I have an icon in this community. I have a gentleman that, in my opinion, is one of the foremost experts in this community. He has decades of experience, decades of encounters. I have with me tonight, everyone, the one, the only, Mr. Darrell Denton. Mr. Denton, how are you doing this evening, sir?
Hi, I'm doing great, Daniel, and I can tell you this much. The only thing I'm an expert at is saying my prayers daily. But, I've had lots of experiences and encounters, but I'm surely no expert, and I certainly appreciate the kindness coming from you. Thank you so much.
Well, sir, it is an absolute honor for me to have you on my show tonight. And I first learned about you from a friend of mine who you were on his podcast, and well, I can't say I first learned about you. I had you on. You were on his podcast, but where I first learned about you was actually on Sasquatch Chronicles, and then I heard you on Bigfoot Society, and I was like, I've heard that name so many times. I've got to do more research, and then it just was like I went down a rabbit hole and just couldn't get enough information about you and your friend Mr. Martin Groves and Mr. Ron Moorhead. In my opinion, you guys are. If there's a Mount Everest, you can't just put 4 people on a Mount Everest to the cryptid community, but you 3 are absolutely on my Mount Everest in this community. So.
Well, I can definitely say that about Ronald J. Moorhead. Ron is such a close friend to me, and I just think the world of him. Him and Carrie and I are very close, and my fiance Rosie's thinks the world of her, and we're just really good. We hang together and we care about each other. But first thing about Ron, he's such a great guy. He's a book of knowledge. I think the world of him. He's kind of like my opinion, the number one Bigfoot person in the world. And when you talk about Martin Groves, he's been my best friend 43 years. I was elected official for 26 years, I believe it was. And Martin was a chief deputy of the same county I was in. And back in the day, in the 90s, when we had our first encounters, the only person I could talk to was Martin Groves. I had mine in November of 92. He had his in May of 93. And you couldn't just go find a podcast or find a group to share your story with, or because people thought you were crazy back then. It's so much more open now than it was then. But, we've been through a lot together, and I can't leave out my brother Barton Nunley. He's with us a lot too. He's one of my other research partners, and Martin, Barton, and Ron and I, and all of us get together, and we have a certain place we go to quite a bit last year. This year it's about to get started because we do winter to about end of May, and then we're done. Then we're mainly doing conferences and that type thing. But, those guys are fantastic. I don't even put myself in the same category as them. I've had a lot of experiences, and Barton tells me all the time. Barton tells me too. There's nobody that knows more about Bigfoot than me. Well, that is their opinion. I'm sure there's a lot of people that know more than I do. But right. I'm just blessed to have those encounters. And my Lakota, my grandmother was full-blooded Lakota Sioux, and she taught me a lot about these creatures when I was younger, growing up. And we call them the Chayutanka. And when I go into the woods or the forest, I address them as the Chayutanka. And you don't go out finding Bigfoot; they find you.
Yep.
And they do know your intentions. And if you're running around with a gun and a flashlight and a camera, your chances of seeing them are going to be pretty slim, because I can assure you they've got a watcher watching you when you get out of your vehicle. So,
100%.
Anyway, I'll hush and let you talk.
Well, okay, so how long have you actually been involved with the cryptid community?
Well, it all started for me in November the 6th of 1992. I mean, I knew of Bigfoot. I didn't know where I really believed in Bigfoot or not, but I'm one of those kind of people that's very open-minded. I didn't say they didn't exist. My grandmother called him the boogeyman. And, I didn't take the boogeyman as being what I seen. I thought it was just something that folklore, my grandmother used to tell us kids when we were growing up. And we lived very rural in the country of Middle Tennessee, Cannon County, Tennessee. I mean, I'm talking about, there wasn't a house for 2 miles from us. And my grandfather had a large farm and joining farms next to him that we hunted on. And me and my friends hunted on. And as I got older, we had the 4-wheelers or ATVs. I pulled my camper up there at my grandfather's place next to his barn, and we camp hunt the whole first week of black powder season. And that's when I got started. My encounter was November 6th of 92, my very first one. It was definitely life-changing. It absolutely scared me to death. And I don't scare very easy. I've been in the woods. I've been around bears, everything you can think of. And I'm careful and cautious, but I don't get scared. But, this was terrifying. So this thing came out of a cane thicket on the riverbank and walked right in front of me. I'm in the tree stand 28, 30 feet up and on a 45-degree angle hill. Tennessee's full of steep hills, hollows, and mountains, and that's what I was hunting on. And this thing jumped a creek, walked right down the game trail, looked right up at me, showed me its teeth, growled at me. It was mad. It was really mad that I was in its area. And I'd never been that far back in that area before. My grandfather, it was nearly a mile in from my grandfather's house that I walked 3 large hills. And, it was 45-minute walk up and down those hills at minimum. And I was in there early the day before, and the morning of is when I seen this creature. And they didn't like me being there. And I literally could not even breathe. I was that frightened. This thing was looking at me. It walked over to a tree limb that I had a drag rag hanging in. That's a thing you put around your boot. You walked into the woods. It kind of covers up the human scent, and it puts out that dough and heat estrus smell, and you hang it up in a tree, and it kind of attracts hopefully a buck deer, the male deer, into your shooting range. So I'd done that the day before. This thing walked right over to that thing and just ripped the whole tree limb out of the tree and went right back to the spot it was standing and looked at me like it just wanted to kill me. It was pretty, I've never been that frightened before at that time. So I didn't know what to do because this thing was big and I had one shot with a 50 caliber black powder rifle. And it was one of those old CVS that weren't the best accurate shots anyway. I was a pretty good shot with that gun, but I still today don't think a 50 caliber bullet would have brought this thing down. And I decided just to wait it out and see. Hopefully it wasn't going to kill me, but it wanted to, but it didn't. So it walked on off a different direction and looked back at me as it was walking off, and I ran all the way over those hills back to my grandfather's house. And I told him what I'd seen, and my granddad and I were super close. He always called me boy. He never called me by my name. And I told him I seen a monster in the woods, Granddad. And he said, "A monster? What are you talking about?" And I described it to him. He goes, "Oh, you seen a wood booger?"
Yeah.
I said, "Wood booger? What is a wood booger?" Because my granddad had never mentioned anything about anything like this in the woods around there. But he got to telling me he'd seen 4 in his lifetime and heard a lot more than that. And he knew they were in the area, but they were very territorial, but they didn't harm you if you didn't bother them. And he went on to say, I shouldn't have told you to go back in there that far because nobody goes in that area. They're probably living back in there. So
let's kind of back up just a little bit to the very beginning of that. So I'm kind of paint a picture for our listeners and our viewers. So you go out the day before in this area, you just kind of check everything out. You put the scent rag up, and the day of, you go out, climb up into your stand. And I'm a hunter myself, and I've hunted out deer stands. I get in there, probably about 30 minutes before sunrise, get
Sure.
settled in, stay quiet, just kind of open my ears. That's when all your senses start
Right.
popping. And so you're up in the deer stand. And so how long were you already up in the deer stand? And I assume you might have, did you hear it coming, or did it all of a
Well,
sudden just
no,
pop up?
what actually happened, the day before opening day, I've been going up there with three of my buddies, Cody, Jason, and trying to think who else was with us. There was three of us anyway. We went up there every year we'd been going up there for about 5 years. I was at that time, I had a little girl, and these guys were friends of mine that I worked with, Cody, Jason, and Scott. And we would go up there and stay the whole week of black powder season. We'd take off from work or vacation, whatever we had for that week, and that's what we would do. We've been going up there for about 5 years. We had tree stands actually built in different areas. We had a radius of 5 to 6 miles to hunt because my grandfather had a super large farm, but at the same time, all of his adjoining neighbors allowed us to hunt on their property because it was very rural. They didn't care if we were hunting out there, as long as we didn't shoot a cow or some type of livestock, and we were a lot more careful than that. But that's how it all got. I've been going up there all my life hunting. I actually grew up on this farm. I stayed with my grandparents until I was school age, and then I stayed there all summer, worked the fields, tobacco field, hay field, did everything I could do with my granddad. And that particular morning, the day before, instead of we had stands built that we could hunt out of, but I asked my grandfather, I want to go into a place where a big trophy deer is at. That's what I'm after this year, Granddad. And he was on his back porch, and he pointed over and he said, "You see that third ridge there?" And I said, "I do." He said, "Go over that ridge. To the bottom of that ridge, there'll be a deep creek, 10 or 12 foot wide. It used to be an old grist mill there, and that was my old home place. You've been there years ago by car or go around a different direction, a gravel road. But he said there's definitely big deer in that area because nobody goes back in there." So that was my plan. I went to where he told me to go, and it was a long walk over those hills. And yeah, we camped. Had my camper up there, and it was parked next to my grandfather's barn. We plugged it in. We had everything set up, TV, and grilling out. Just a big time for all of us guys that we had every year. And told my granddad that night, I said, "Come down and wake me up when you get up." And my granddad got up at 4:30 or 5 o'clock because he would milk cows, and he would come to that same barn we were parked next to, and he'd come woke me up, and I headed that direction. So. It was probably 5:30. So when I headed that way, and I know for exactly what time the creature stepped out. I'd seen 3 deer come out of a thicket to the left of me. When I say a thicket, it was a tall cane, like this Green River cane or a creek bank cane, and it grows 10 or 12 feet tall. It's real thick. It's hard to even walk through. It's so thick. I seen 3 deer come out to the left of me from that area. I don't know exactly, but somewhere right around that cane. They crossed the creek and went up on the other side of the bank of the creek. There was a game trail that went right down past where I'd hung that drag rag the day before. And it was 8:23 in the morning. Those deer had been out there for probably a good 30 minutes just walking around eating, and I watched the lead deer, the doe, the larger doe. It looked like 2 yearlings with her. They weren't full grown, but they were with her. One was on the right of her, one was kind of to the left behind her. She started looking over in that direction, and her ears perked up, and she just froze. She was looking over there like I've seen deer do before when they heard something or smell something. And I'm thinking it's a buck. It's a big male deer that's going to come out of there, and she's kind of winging it out, and I'm kind of excited thinking that. And then she takes her right front hoof or paw or leg and breaks up and pats to the ground 3 or 4 times, trying to make something move over there. And I'm watching her, and she's just froze. All 3 of these deer are just looking right in this direction. Just their head just froze in that direction. Then she raises her nose and lets out a real loud blowing sound. Sounds like somebody sneezing, but it's not. It sounds kind of similar to that when they blow. And when she did that, she turned to the right and ran right back in front of me. Now, I'm on a 45-degree angle in a tree stand, 25 to 30 feet up, and I'm at a 45-degree angle. I'm kind of looking over the little creek over on top of them. And they all take off running as fast as they can to the right. They come out crossing in front of me. Went right past the drag rag, just running as fast as they can. I was thinking, what made them do that? It was like somebody had shot at them or something. And thought it was very strange. I thought, well, it must be one heck of a buck over there. That's what I was thinking. I didn't have anything in my mind about a Bigfoot or some type of creature stepping out. So I was sitting there, and all of a sudden I seen this cane thicket. You could see the back of it. You could see it moving. It was swaying in the middle like something was trying to come through it. And I thought, wow, this must be a big deer coming through this cane thicket, because this stuff is, it might be 3 or 4 inches round. It's real tall and thick, and it's moving. And then I see it come to the edge, and it's moving, and out sticks a leg, and this creature steps out right to the edge of it. And I'm like, what is that? I mean, I was like, what is this? I mean, it was kind of like my mind didn't want to even believe what I was looking at. And it just takes one little step and jumps the creek, just one leap, lands on the other side on that little game trail. And it walks right down straight in front of me. I'm up on the hill looking down on it, and it stops and looks right at it. It knew exactly where I was at. And I'd heard something when I went in that morning going up the hill. I thought it was a person at first. It kind of shocked me because I knew nobody would be in there hunting. I knew my buddies wasn't in there. They were in a whole completely different direction. My grandfather wasn't anybody hunting there while we were there. And this thing steps out, when it stepped out, when it leaps and lands on the other side, it walks right down and it stops and turns and faces me, looking straight up at me in the tree. And I'm literally just thinking, what is this? I mean, I'd never seen anything like that. And I surely didn't think there was a such thing as one of these creatures in the woods. So by that time, I was just trying to figure out what to do. And it was looking at me, and it was the ugliest, meanest looking creature I've ever seen. The right side of its mouth was kind of out of contortion. It was kind of twisted, like it's hard to explain what I'm saying, but it looked like it had a deformity of some type or something had happened to it. And it had black leather looking face, and the hair was just all over it. It was a good sized creature, probably about 8 foot tall. I judged that by the limb that it stood under, where the drag rag was. And, it looked at me and it growled, looking right at me, just staring me down like it was really mad. And then it let out show me its teeth. I'll never forget those teeth. It showed me its teeth, and it was mad. And then it lets out, after it goes over and grabs this limb, it reaches up, grabs the drag rag and smell of it. Then it just rips the whole tree limb out of the tree. Now, it's not a major, massive tree limb. It's probably 2 or 3 inches round at the base of the tree. But still, it took a pretty good power to pull the thing off the tree like that. And it threw it on the ground. And that really got my attention when it done that. I thought, oh, no, this thing's coming across the creek, and it's going to come up this tree and just pull me out. So, I had a climbing stand that I was in, and I didn't really know what to do. I was literally trying to catch my breath. I was just couldn't hardly breathe. I was so intense and thinking, well, this thing's going to kill me. And it was really mad. And then about that time, it lets out this long, complete, scream, yell, scream at the same time. It is so loud that it echoes all down this hollow. And when it done that, I thought, well, this is it. I remember reaching and grabbing my 50 caliber muzzleloader, pulling the trigger back on it, the hammer, ready to just at least get one shot in before it come across to get me, because I just knew it was coming across to get me. And I just had it against the bar. I had a bar I pulled up at this stand. It had like a camo on it, and it fell down across my feet. And it was about up to my nose to kind of conceal me. And it was my gun was leaning against that bar. And I remember hearing it click when I pull the hammer back. And I thought, well, I'm going to get one shot in on it anyway if it comes across this creek. And about that time, it turns and walks the opposite direction, starts walking away. It stops. It looks back at me one more time. And then it goes, and I watched it walk into the hardwoods till it went out of sight. And instead of climbing down the tree stand, I wasn't going to take 20 minutes to climb down that tree in that climbing stand. I just lowered the bar in front, and I jumped out of the top of this tree stand and landed on the side of that hillside, as steep as it was, and slid down in those leaves all the way into the creek. And the water was up to about my waist when I went in. I had my gun above my head like this. And I just took out running as fast as I could back up the hill the way I came in the hillside, and run as fast as I could. After I crossed the first hill going up the second one was a hollow, a long hollow. It's probably 100 yards tall to each hollow. And just out of breath. I couldn't hardly breathe. I got halfway up the second hill looking back, and there this thing was standing on the hill, the top of that first hill that I'd come down looking at me. I'm thinking, well, this thing's going to chase me all the way to the house and try to catch me. And I don't think it was the same creature looking back on it. It might have been one that looked like the same one, but I think it was probably another one watching me. And, by the time I got back to my grandfather's house, which when I got down the third hill, I jumped the barbed wire fence that I had to climb over that morning. I just was running so fast, I jumped it and tore a gash all the way I tore my pants all the way from the boot leg all the way up past my knee and tore a big gash in the side of my leg where the barbed wire caught me when I jumped. And I didn't even know I'd done it. I just kept running. There was about a 200-yard wide sage field that was fenced in from there to my grandfather's gate where he kept cows in there. And when I got to that gate, I ran through the back into the yard up on his porch, through the back door, and to the right inside to the living area where my grandfather was sitting in his rocking chair, and he had a big old wood pot-bellied stove in the center. And I just went over and sat down behind it in the floor in the corner of the house. And I was so out of breath I couldn't even talk. I was just completely just out of breath. I couldn't speak. And it took me probably 5-10 minutes before I could talk. I was just gasping for air. My granddad said, "Boy, what's wrong with you? Boy, what's wrong with you?" And I said, "Granddad," and I'd get up and look out the window, and I'd go back and look out the back door where I came in to make sure this thing wasn't still coming. And I finally got my breath, and I said, "I seen a monster in the woods." And he said, "A monster? Ain't no monsters in these woods, boy." And I said, "Yeah, it's a monster." He said, "What did it look like?" And I told him and described it to him. He goes, "Oh, you seen a wood booger?"
Yep.
And I said, "A wood booger?" Now, me and my granddad were really tight. We were really close. He had never told me about a wood booger. I'd never heard of anything about any of these creatures. My grandmother called them, I didn't know if it was really just an old saying or what, but she called them, boogeyman at night to get us kids in the house. But, when he explained to me he'd seen 4 of them in his lifetime, and he'd heard more than that of them. He said, "I hear them screaming and hollering down in the woods all the time, and I'll be working in the field, and one of them's just standing up to the fence looking at me while I'm working." And in the wintertime, they get hungry, and they come to the chicken house here, and they'll take 2 or 3 chickens, and they'll leave a little pile of rocks and sticks like they're paying for it.
Mm.
And he said, they don't bother you. They're territorial, and you probably interrupted his hunt because you're in his area, and you probably made him mad. I should have thought about it before I sent you that far in, but I didn't. And I was kind of shocked, as close as my granddad was. I never heard anything about a wood booger. So, I did a lot of studying about them because there wasn't any internet that I was knowing how to use at that time. Or, I went to the library to try to figure out what I'd seen. There was no Facebook groups. There wasn't any podcast or radio shows about this stuff. And I found out that, I found a book in the library, and it said the 10 type of Bigfoot.
Yep.
And the number 2 one was listed as a wood booger. And it looked just like what I'd seen. The only difference was the picture had red eyes. The one I'd seen had black eyes. So, but that's what it said, a wood booger.
So yeah, I lived in like 3 hot spots for Bigfoot, Sasquatch, boogers, whatever you want to call them. See, I lived in Washington State most of my life.
Oh wow, yeah.
I lived in West Virginia for a little while,
Okay.
and I lived in
Got a
Tennessee.
brother up there.
Huh?
I have a brother that lives up there.
I also lived in Tennessee for a little while.
Okay.
So but see, I lived on the west side. I lived in Shelby County.
Okay. You're up there toward Memphis area. That area.
Yep. Actually, I graduated high school north of Memphis in a little town called Millington,
Oh
where
yeah.
the Naval Air Station Memphis
Sure.
was. So, but
Yeah, I got a good friend that lives up. Well, he don't live quite there, but well, you probably know Larry Porch.
well, I mean, they say it's a small world, but
That's Beast TV. They've been around forever. I was one of the first shows I done years ago. Beast TV with Larry Porch and Mark Newbill, and they're in Tennessee. Good guy, real good guys, super good guys. But they've had a show on for years.
I'm gonna have to look that up.
Yeah.
So
Super
let's go
good
from.
guys.
So that's your first encounter, and I'm tell you, I heard your first encounter, but not into the detail that you just gave, and that is one. It's a fascinating encounter. Two, it's downright. It's scary. It's terrifying.
Well, you know, it changed my life. It really did. I can't think of anything that ever changed my life like that did. It was, like I said, I've never been a scared person. I mean, I've camped in the woods when I was a little boy, those same woods that I seen this creature in, but not as deep. I was deeper in than I'd ever been there on my grandfather's farm.
Mm-hmm.
We deer hunted, 200 or 300 yards from the fence line, and we'd kill deer every year. There was so many deer up there, but
Mm-hmm.
I'd never been in that far, but I'd never been scared of anything. I'd heard things in the woods and seen things in the woods, but I was cautious but not scared to be there. I'd camp out all night by myself when I was 14 years old in the woods, me and my dog and my shotgun. So
Yep.
but after that, it took me. I would have never got over it if I hadn't had my second experience, but it took me a long time. Probably the first 4 or 5 months, I had nightmares about this thing, and it was pretty hard to deal with. And I really kind of had a form of PTSD or something.
Mm-hmm.
It was really. I'd never been affected by anything quite like that, but that went on for quite a while, and I didn't go. I deer hunted out of my truck. I had plenty. I had farmland. I could just sit in my truck and wait for them to come out in fields and stuff, that type of thing. Legalized hunting, my grandfather's farm or that. But and I still went up there opening muzzleloader with my buddies, but I didn't. I told them I didn't care to hunt. I was just going to visit my granddad, but I told them what I'd seen, and they said, "You've been drinking, Big D." They called me Big D. I said, "No, I didn't have anything to drink," and I just let it go. I didn't want to dig into it any further than it always was. But it took me a long time to get over it. Matter of fact, I didn't go in the woods at all till 1999 was the first time I went in the woods. It was 7 years.
Yeah, so 7 years, that encounter hit you so hard, you just it completely disrupted your hunting season for 7 years. And that's not the first time I've heard stories of where hunters. I've even heard stories of hunters sell all their hunting gear, all their guns, and they're done. They will not go hunting regardless any longer. But you said you had a second encounter that kind of helped you deal with your first encounter. How long after your first encounter did you have your second encounter?
Well, a few. It was 1999. But I want to say this. I'm a very spiritual person. I always have been. My grandmother was spiritual. On my dad's side, she was full-blooded Lakota Sioux, Lakota Sioux of the Indian Nation, and I was super, super close to my grandmother. She taught me so much, and I learned a lot from her about different things later on. About this. She was. I don't even remember how she was so very old when she passed, and she had a lot of things to say about them, and I still address them as a Chayutaka because that's the Lakota people call them the Chayutaka, which means great elder of the forest, and they are the watcher of the forest. And I do believe that, and I do believe they can read you, And I know they know what your intentions are. They feel that somehow. They do have special powers, and I personally believe they're an ancient type people. There's several different types. Some of them will harm you. Scott Carpenter was such a good friend of mine. He's been gone August of 23, and he helped me rid some I had at my house at one time. And, I'm like him. I believe some of them think that you might just be on the menu. Not always. It's just like people. There's good ones and bad ones. Now, I run into some good ones that were friendly. I go back to that time when I was so terrified of this creature and what it done to him. Martin Groves had the same thing I had. Me and him would go to lunch, and he had nobody to talk to but me because we were best friends. And he told me what had happened to him. A dog man tried to kill him, and
Yeah, we'll get into that.
He and I would go sit and talk about this stuff because we had nobody else we could talk to. I'm an elected official. He's a deputy sheriff. They don't think we're some kind of crazy people start talking about this in the community. But, the thing I guess that really that saved me more than anything was in 1999. I love to fish. I've always been a fisherman, whether it be bank fishing or remember I was president of the Bass Club for 19 years at my county, 2 counties actually, and I did that for a long time. Love to do that. I love to fish, still love to fish, but I don't fish like I did. But I'm not a member of the club anymore. Just got too many other things going on. But I was fishing. I had a place on the Cumberland River in Tennessee, and it's between Nashville and Cheatham County, which is basically the other side of the dam, which forms Lake Barkley that goes all the way to Kentucky Lake, the LBL. So, I had a spot that was close to an old sewer water treatment plant. I believe that's what it was. And it was a friend of mine in high school. His uncle or cousin worked there. It's a very rural area. You pull off and you pull into this water sewer treatment plant, and they had a gate to go through, a big metal wire gate, like, wire across the top, like you see around security areas. And you had to know somebody to go in there. And I went with him because he knew the guy that his uncle or cousin worked there. I don't remember which one it was, but the guard let us in. We pulled down behind this building and we parked in the very back, and it was right on the Cumberland River. And it was very rural with nobody out there. And we would park in the very back left corner, and we'd go through a gate that went down next to the river. And it was a long game trail that went for, I don't know, it went for miles. And you could see deer tracks in it and everything else. But we walked down this trail about 200 yards, I guess it was, back into the woods. And it was where a creek came in. A creek came out and ran into the Cumberland River. There was a sandbar out there, and we would fish there and catch a lot of sauger and that type fish, and just bank fishing and have a good time in the spring, especially crappie too. But I was down there by myself is how I run into these creatures. I had no idea that I was ever going to run into these creatures again, and I didn't want to run into them again. I was not looking to ever encounter these things again, and that was the least of my thought, was to ever have an encounter again. So, but I was actually down there, and the way it actually happened, I still was able to fish there, even though my 2 friends didn't care to go fish as much as we once did. I went by myself down there, and I'd pull in and park back there and carry my minnow bucket down there, and I was fishing, and I went up to get another minnow. My minnow bucket was gone. Couldn't figure out what happened to it. Looked everywhere for it. Thought, well, how could that happen? My minnow bucket, my minnows are gone. So, long story short, second week, I was down there a week later, same thing happened. Lost a minnow bucket again. This time it was a little stormy. I thought, well, maybe the wind blew it into the water, but of course the styrofoam minnow bucket doesn't sink. You would have seen it. But I couldn't figure out what happened to it that time. I got kind of weird. I'm thinking somebody's in these woods here and they're stealing my minnow bucket. It was very strange. I would set up, and you had to walk down this sandbar to reel in your fish, because if you didn't, the bank was kind of jagged and had tree limbs sticking out of it, and your line would get all tangled in it. So you walk down this little sandbar, reel in the fish, and go up and put them on the stringer. Then I'd go up and sit down on a 5-gallon bucket next to a tree, and I'd get my minnow bucket and put another minnow on, like normal you do when you're fishing for crappie or whatever I was fishing for at that particular time. And the third week I was there, I thought, well, this is kind of strange. I'm gonna tie a rope, a small rope, around the wire handle to the minnow bucket, and I tied that to the tree that I was sitting next to. That way, if I went down to reel my fish in, I would have enough time to see what was still in my minnow bucket, or it wouldn't be able to take it without untying the rope. I was thinking it was a person in there that was doing it. It kind of weirded out a little bit. I actually carried my 410 shotgun that day down there because thinking it might be somebody trying to, harass me or something or steal something. But they already stole my minnow buckets. But this particular day, I went down there and put my lines out. I had 3 poles, and I put them out, and I caught a fish and came back up the bank and sat down up next to the tree and reached over to get my minnow bucket and get a minnow, and my bucket was down that game trail a little way where it was real thick right in there. It was a kudzu, if you know what I'm talking about. It's a real thick looking vine stuff that grows real thick.
Yep.
The trail went through that, and you had to bend down real low to get through there. I'd never been down in that part. I always stopped at where I was at. But the minnow bucket the rope was tight from the tree to the game trail into that kudzu. And I could see the minnow bucket. So I bent down to go over to get the minnow bucket. Where the lid was off, it was still on the rope, but it was off the top. The water had been sloshed out, and it was kind of muddy on that little game trail anyway. And there was only 1 minnow in there. And I had like 4 or 5 dozen minnows in there when I got there, and I'd probably use 4 or 5, but it wasn't more than that. I thought that was very strange. Well, I was looking back in there, and I looked back in that area, and I noticed to the left there was a minnow bucket laying in the kudzu back there. And I kind of bent down a little bit, looked to the right, and there was another minnow bucket a little closer to me in the kudzu. They looked like the same 2 minnow buckets that I'd probably lost weeks before. And this time my minnow bucket was stretched over, like something tried to carry it away into that direction. And I looked down next to the minnow bucket, and there was a footprint where the water had sloshed out. It was kind of muddy in there anyway. And when I looked down and seen the footprint, it looked like, it was not a massive footprint. It looked like a person's footprint, a kid's. It was not a huge track. It looked like a kid, maybe a 10 or 12-year-old kid's footprint was in next to that bucket, and my minnows were down. And I thought, well, this is kind of strange. It must be a kid down here stealing my minnow bucket. Why would a kid pull this in here and steal my minnow bucket? So I'm kind of baffled thinking about it. It wasn't a full grown person's boot track or something. And that's why I brought my gun with me in case it was somebody trying to harass me or do something to me. But so went back, I picked my minnow bucket up and put it over back next to the bucket I was sitting on, 5-gallon bucket that I always carried my equipment in. And I was sitting on it next to a tree. And I wasn't fishing, but I was acting like I was fishing. Had my poles out. I was just waiting, kind of looking to my left to see what was in there and what was getting my minnow bucket. I probably waited a good 2 or 3 hours, just about started to give up and about ready to go to the house. And all of a sudden, I see this creature. And it's leaning over, looking at me. It's holding on to a little tree in there, and it's in the kudzu, but its head and its left leg is hanging out, just kind of like that, looking at me. And it literally scared me to death. When I seen that thing, I said, "Oh my God, there's another one of these things I've run into." But this one didn't look anything like the one I'd seen 7 years earlier. It looked different, but I could tell that it was a creature, one of those creatures, but it wasn't like that one. It was more like the Patterson Gimlin looking type. It didn't look like that. What I found out would look like a type 3 or 4 is what they're called. But now that I know, I didn't know that then. But anyway, this thing was looking at me, and it would go back up, and then it would peek down at me and go back up, and I started sitting there thinking, man, do I need to get my gun and get out of here, or what do I need to do? And I sat for a little longer looking at it, and it'd look at me, so I just got on my gear and I headed up. I thought, I'm not going to fool with these creatures again. I don't want to be around them. I don't want to get anything started with these things, and I don't want to bother me, and I won't bother them. Well, they just eat at me. I got back to the house. I thought about it all week. You know, I've got to go back. And I did. So I went back the next week. It was on a Sunday. And to set up my gear, I wasn't actually fishing, but I was waiting for these creatures kind of out of my left peripheral vision, waiting for them to see if they'd come out again. I set my bucket like I did normal, and sure enough, a couple hours, there it was again. He was leaning down. He'd look at me, then he'd go and put his head back in. And when I seen him, he'd put his head back in. Well, it turned out to be a female. It was a she. But, you know, I started, I didn't feel frightened of the creature like I thought I would. I did still have my gun. It was on the back side of the tree, and they couldn't see it. And it was just old single shot 410. There wasn't anything, but still it's a weapon, and they are leery of guns. But, you know, I started interacting, and before I knew it, there was another one about the same size as this one that was behind this one. And they both pretty much, I could see both of them. They both looked, and both of them were black, solid black. And after time it went on and time had kept going, I started going down there regularly. I actually went every day or every other day. And I did this for all the way up to almost 2004. I was there nearly every day or every other day. I made time and went down there either in the morning or sometime during the day. A couple times in the summer, I became pretty friendly with these creatures. They trusted me. I trusted them. There was a family of them in there. I couldn't tell you how many. I only seen 3 of them. I seen parts of other ones, but not the whole creature. These were the type that made the big X's in the woods, which I found out from other people since then that they are the friendlier type. These creatures never got aggressive with me. They were very friendly with me. I became very attached to them. They became like my friends. I camped out in there with them. Took a sleeping bag, went down and camped right there next to that tree, and they were over in their little area of the kudzu, and I'd see them in the middle of the night, look over the hedge at me or look through the kudzu to see what I was doing. But, you know, I got pretty close to those creatures, and I really did learn a lot from them. I could have learned a lot more. Every time I would go in, I would tell them, my name is Darrell. Will you please tell me your name? And they would look at me. And so the younger female, she was when I first started going in there, she was probably about 5 foot tall. By the time it was over, she was probably about 6.5 foot tall. The one behind her was a male, and he was a little bit roughly the same age as her. The one that I seen regularly behind those two, he was about 7 foot tall, and he was a male. And I could hear other ones in the kudzu because I started bringing them gifts. They brought me gifts. They made me some really cool gifts. They made me some nice things. And I actually had the female, which the only words I did find out, they do understand some of my words. They understand what Chayatanka means. They understand some of the Lakota words. They understand the English words. I think they understand all of them. But they do understand what you're saying. Plus, they have their own language. So these creatures are very intelligent and very elusive. But, you know, I found out how intelligent they were. I would bring them food. I made a little box. I put in the forks of that tree I sat next to. And I would put gifts in there for them. And they would come and get them, and they would leave me gifts. And the female was the closest one I ever got to. I actually put my foot out, and she touched my shoe, my boot, the end of my boot, and she actually touched the end of my finger.
Wow.
And it took me probably 2 years to even gain the trust that I got out of them. They trusted me enough to let me come in, but they always had the larger male behind those two watching over them. And I asked them repeatedly, questions after questions, and I got no answers. I would get a head shake or a nod or something. I knew they knew how to communicate. I just wanted my best to try to communicate with them. And one day I went in there and I would bring them gifts, and I brought them some whistles, little plastic whistles like you buy at the drugstore or the dime store, little plastic with a little black string on it.
Yep.
There was 8 or 10 in a bag for like a birthday party thing, and I brought those and I hung them on the limbs around the gifting area when I left. And when I would say, I'm leaving now, I'll see you soon, bye, I'd say, bye, I'll see you tomorrow or the next day, I would hear absolutely amazing. I would hear one behind me go, bye. I hear one over to the left go, bye. And I hear another one to the right, bye. They would mock me. I would say, bye, and they'd say, bye. And it was amazing. I took a buddy of mine in there, Darrell. Kept telling him these creatures are incredible. They're smart. They're intelligent. They're not an ape. They're as smart as people. And I took him in there, and he got so scared he ran all the way back to the truck, and he never would go back again. He didn't want to be around them. But anyway, when I brought those whistles in there, from then on, every time I would come in, they would start blowing the whistles. They would hear my voice. I'd be coming in from the gate, and I would say, hey, I'm here. I'm coming in to see y'all. And I'd always kind of announce myself, and they'd start blowing those whistles. And you'd hear those whistles blowing, one across the river, one straight ahead, one to the left. There was, a lot of creatures blowing them, and they would stop when I got in there and sit down. But
that's amazing.
It took me such a long time to communicate with them. I asked them so many times, where they come from and where are you from? And they just looked at me, and I said, please tell me where you're from. Are you from the heavens? Didn't say anything or nod. And I said, are you from another galaxy? And they went.
Really? The
female did that, and the large male behind her did that. And forever, I tried to get them to say words. And I went in one day, and I had a box of jelly-filled donuts. They loved them. They loved jelly-filled donuts. And they wouldn't, if you just threw them on the ground, they wouldn't eat them. They wanted them in a plate, like we would, clean it and put them over there. Then they would come out and grab it and take it in, and whatever I didn't see them eating it. They'd take it to the cat zoo and eat it in there. Tried forever to get them to communicate with me by asking them questions and stuff. They made me had a half-gallon milk carton that they put sticks through all 4 sides, and it formed an X where it came out all 4 sides. It had ivy around it. It was an old milk carton that was apparently been in a river, because at one time it was red and white, but it was pink and white when they gave it to me. But I still got that, and they made me that gift. And it was pretty cool, because that was their marker, the X. And I asked them so many things. I can't even remember all the things that I asked them, but I got 2 words out of them the whole time that I was with them. And I would have stayed with them longer, because I was down there with them every day, or every other day I went down there. And it was a little bit out of the way. It was 25-minute, 30-minute drive, so it wasn't like I could just drive real quick over there. So, but I don't know what happened to them. It really bothered me. I went down there right before that. I didn't see them again. I went to. I was gone for 7 or 8 days, and I'd never missed that. I'd never been away from them that long. But I'd really gotten busy at work, and I couldn't get away, and I just couldn't find time to get down there. And it bothered me the whole time. So when I did get down there after 7 or 8 days, it may have been 2 weeks, I walked in there, and they had bulldozers and backhoes and just cleared that whole area off back there. And destroyed the cat zoo was gone, the trees were cut, and there was like stakes in the ground with little ribbons on them, like they were going to build something back there. They had it marked off, and you could see the tracks where a dozer had been in there. And It really upset me. I walked back in there as far as I could. I yelled for them. I even got a boat, went to the other side of the river a couple weeks after. I went back in there numerous times and I never seen them again.
That's upsetting. I mean, it's just human encroachment. It's just we can't really have anything nice. When I think about it.
Well,
You know,
I don't know. I just hope they weren't killed.
yeah,
I'm thinking that they could have been because, when these people went in to work on this area, they could have very easily thought it was me coming in or somebody and maybe showed themselves and they may have called, the authorities or Game and Fish or somebody. They come out and shot them.
yeah. I don't.
It's very strange that I went back in there miles. I'm talking about past where they were at, and I never found another track or found anything of them. So something happened to them.
Yeah, you don't want to. I don't want to think. That something bad happened to him. I'd like to think that maybe they moved on and went on from there.
Well, it's bothered me a lot over the years, and knowing what I know about these creatures now, I do think they would have reached out to me and found me because I know they have the capability of doing that.
Yeah.
So I do think something happened to them. I hope it didn't, but I do think it did. So
Right.
never
So
seen them again. I don't know. Very strange, but it was probably the greatest experience of my lifetime because I learned they're not an ape. These creatures are
Right.
very smart. They're very intelligent. They can read you. They know your intentions. They have abilities like we don't understand. Um, I mean, I can't tell you. Ron Moorhead is a close friend of mine, and he pretty much, his book, The Quantum, is a read everybody should have. I've read it 4 times, and every time I read it, I learn something a little more because they do have a higher vibration, their energy, which gives them abilities to maybe transform or cloak or go
Yep.
interdimensional. And we don't have that. I don't know if they're in a different dimension or what they're in, but they have some very serious abilities that we don't understand.
Oh, I know. Um. So you were an elected official in East Tennessee, correct?
No, Middle Tennessee.
Middle Tennessee,
Right.
and in the same county, Mr. Martin Groves
Correct.
was deputy sheriff.
Martin's 10 minutes away from me.
Okay, so you said you guys have sat and talked about this. Now, how did he approach you with his story of the LBL?
Well, his story, what basically happened on that is this was before he had his encounter. Before he had his encounter, it was probably a month or so after I'd had my encounter. And Martin and I were close. And I was just, not everybody I would tell things to, but I trusted him 100%. I knew he wouldn't think I was crazy or he would understand if I told him something, he'd believe me because he knows I'm straightforward and I'm honest about things. And I was just telling him one day, I said, man, you know what? I'm really having a hard time. I had this sighting and encounter up in Woodbury, Tennessee, Canton County, Tennessee, on my grandfather's farm. And it's still got me torn up. I hadn't gotten over it. I explained to him what had happened. I trusted him. There was 3 or 4 people that I told that I trusted enough to do that with, and none of them ever told anybody that I'm aware of. Besides, kept it between us. But Martin was a close friend, and I didn't have any idea that something was going to happen to him. And then, 4 or 5 months later, he's in the LBL with his partner, one of his sheriff's department buddies, and they're turkey hunting. And these creatures, these dogmen, tried to kill him. They tried to attack him. So, and he comes and tells me, he's tore all to pieces. So I knew where he was coming from. I knew what he felt. And, it was very strange that I'd encountered him, he has an encounter. And, we pretty much kept it quiet for quite a while. Martin kept his quiet for a long time. He was afraid to tell people because he's afraid he'd lose his job. And second of all, I couldn't tell people, hey, the thing about it was people in my area, including Martin, we had been called in the area that we lived in. on people that had seen Bigfoot or had activity around their house or their farm, and Martin would go out and investigate. And then I had friends of mine that didn't know I'd had a sighting, but they were telling me, "Hey, I got this thing living over at my house, and what do you think I ought to do?" And
Right.
so that kind of gave us a little more ease because we had some people that knew these things were around in our area and had seen them. And of course, we didn't go tell our entire story to them, but it made it a little easier for both of us knowing that we weren't the only one that had seen these things. So,
Right. So let me ask you this. So how long was it before you and Martin actually, because I know from listening on to interviews that you guys have had experiences together
oh yeah, oh
in
yeah,
the LBL.
plenty of experiences. Oh yeah, yeah.
So would you mind getting into a Dogman experience that you had?
Yeah, hang on one second.
Sure.
Apologize, I had to let a cat out. Okay, this
No.
well, Martin and I have been researching together in the LBL for I don't know how many years. Um, regularly, probably the last 10. And when I say regularly, our research is mainly um, we don't do a lot of research until usually around October. We start doing our research because the leaves start coming off, it gets a little cooler. And in the summertime, it's so thick in the LBL, you can't see anything, and it's very hard to research. But we'll normally research from sometime in late October, middle of late October, all the way to around the first week of May. And we try to stay away from the ticks and the heat and the thick brush because it's so bad in there. And if you go in there in the summertime, you can't see anything anyway. It's so thick in there. You'd be lucky to catch a glimpse of anything, unless we're on the side of the road or something. But
Right.
we started doing that, like I said, a good 10 years ago, probably, on a regular basis. When I say regular, going down there 2 or 3 times a month sometimes. Sometimes we'd stay 3 or 4 or 5 nights there. Sometimes we'd just be parked in his truck in the middle of nowhere on a dirt road or on a hilltop in the woods. Or we'd be out camped or next to a fire in the woods, just depending on the situation. And Barton joined us, I don't know, 3 or 4 years ago, and he became a regular. So it was me and Barton Nunley and Martin Groves going regularly all the time. And of course, I'd known Ron for a while, and Ron was a close friend, and he was out in California when we started doing all this. And then he moved to North Carolina about 3 years ago. So Ron started going with us. And it was us four, and, we became a team. We call ourselves a team. I got another good friend named Billy Howell that's down in Cheatham County at my old Bigfoot spot there. He still goes there regular, real active down there still, one of the same spots that we investigated for years. But mainly it's just me, Martin, and Barton, and Ron. We'll go out and go to a certain area, and a lot of times it's in the LBL mainly. And mainly just Dogman more than it is Bigfoot. That's pretty much what we do now. We had Bigfoot activity. It was insane. We had Bigfoot activity October a year ago. Like, it was just crazy. We were at a cabin way out and in an area, and these Bigfoot were banging on our porch at night. We'd be sitting next to the fire, and they'd be breaking limbs and making noise. They were right behind us. They would come by the windows when we were trying to sleep, and we could see the big, huge silhouette of them, and putting rocks on the porch and throwing rocks on the side of the house. They're just trying to get our attention. They weren't trying to harm us, but we had a lot of Bigfoot activity there. Always have had around that area. The southern end of the LBL seems to be the more active with Bigfoot. The northern end seems to be more Dogman activity, but that's kind of changed a little bit over the last few years. But Martin and I've seen 3 Dogman in my lifetime. My first one was in 2021 in Tazewell County, Virginia. It looked like a large German Shepherd, about 3 times the size of one. The head was massive. The second Dogman I seen was in the LBL with Martin Groves, and the same night that Martin Groves and I stayed in the area that supposedly nobody had ever stayed in because it was too dangerous. And we were there the whole night, and we were surrounded by some creatures in the middle of the night, and Martin did some things, and they all left. But I seen that one that night. Martin seen one that night too. Then the last one I seen there was in October of 22. Martin and I seen a creature like nothing I'd ever seen. And we just finished a documentary with Small Town Monsters on it, a 3-part series with Small Town Monsters. What a great crew, great bunch of people those guys are. Enjoyed doing that with Martin and Hellbent Holler and a few other people.
Would you mind going over your first Dogman sighting in 2021?
My first Dogman sighting, I just started getting into Dogman with Martin. We were researching in several places, but mainly the LBL, but with Bigfoot and Dogman. But the first sighting I had, I was in a country store in Carrollton, Virginia. My daughter lived there for a while in Virginia, and I had a place up there close to her, and I would stay up there. And had a place there. I stayed there for about 3 years part time when when my kids were there. But I was sitting in a little country store one morning that I went to every morning to get coffee. It's just out in the country, a little country store. An Indian man owns it. Kind of hard to understand at times. And there's a bunch of old farmers that sit in there and at a table every morning and drink coffee and talk, just like they do at an old country store. And I was in there drinking coffee with him one morning, and this man walks in with his son, and he walks up to the counter, and the guy who owns the little market there and gas station, he tells him, he goes, "You know anything about creatures?" And I'm sitting at this table, maybe 7, 8, 10 foot from the counter, and I could hear the guy. He said, and the guy that owns the place didn't understand what he was talking about. He looked over at me, and I got up and walked up there, and he goes, "Do you know anything about creatures?" And I said, "What do you mean creatures?" And he said, "Well, I've got some kind of creature where we live that's killing our goats." I said, "Okay, what is it? Have you seen it?" And he said, "No, but I got tracks of it." And he showed me a picture of a track, and I knew immediately what it was. And he said, "Do you know anything about these things?" I said, "Well, I don't know everything about them. I know a little bit about them, and I've had a little bit of experience researching them and know what the tracks look like." And he said, "Well, you follow me out to my place and let me show you what they've done to them." His great aunt lived there. She had a farm, and her husband was deceased, and him and his wife, daughter, and son, I believe, lived there with her. I think they had a daughter and son. The boy was with him. And they lived with the great aunt on this farm. And I said, "Well, yeah, I guess I can ride out there with you." Well, I found out it was like 2.5 hours drive. And I said, "Well, I can't go today."
Yeah.
Long story short, he said, "Well, I'll give you my address, call me." And next morning I called him, and I didn't have a signal where I had to go. I lost it. It was out in the middle of nowhere. And he met me at an old store that was closed down. I followed him back onto his farm there, and we go across a creek, drive your vehicle across a creek, go up a hill, make a left to go to the farmhouse where the barn and the little shed was for the goats. And the goats were already been removed where they'd been killed. But I went into the area where they had been killed at, and it was real wet in there. You could see tracks. And he goes, "Here's the tracks I took the picture of." And I said, "Well, where's the goats?" And he said, "We've already drugged them off. They were killed." And I said, "Okay." And I knew exactly what I was looking at because I'd seen 2 or 3 different type of dogman tracks, what I call canine type tracks. Some of them will have like 3 toes and a big hock in the back, and some of them will have more like a canine dog complete track with a hock in the back, or not a hock at all. And he said, "What do you think it is?" And I didn't want to scare the guy to death. I mean, I didn't know if he knew what a dog man was. And I said, "It's definitely a creature. It's called a dog man creature. And that's what it looks like anyway." And he said, "Well, what is that?" And I didn't want to get into details, scare the guy to death with his kids there too. So I said, "Well, where do you see these things come in at?" And he said, "Well, I haven't seen them, but we hear them at night, and they come in the afternoon right before dark, and that's when they were killing the goats." And he said, "If you'll go back down where you come in and make a right, there's a road, little gravel road that goes up on top of the hill. We own that property, and there's a gate up there you can go through. You can park up there. If you overlook this field that this barn right here is in, there was a field, probably 200 yards long and probably 200 yards wide. Went all the way to the wood line on the very back side and the very right side. And I was parked up on the hill there where he told me to. And I had my binoculars and I had my gun and I was sitting in my truck with the window down. And I was up there probably 2 or 3 weeks. I would go over there every day and stay to the evening. And I'd go over there one day and stay in the morning to midday. I didn't see anything. I was about to give up because I'd already been up there and spent a lot of time. And he would come up there and check on me and see if I'd seen anything. And I said, "Well, I'm going to give it one more day, and I'll probably have to call it because, it's coming out here every day and not seeing anything. And maybe it's moved on, and because all the goats have been killed anyway." And so I was sitting there. It was a Friday afternoon, and right before dark, very top left-hand corner, I seen a creature come down through the woods. It got to the fence line. It stepped across the fence line. Then it went on all fours and took off running across the field. It ran all the way down to the right corner. And when I say run, this thing didn't run like a dog. It galloped like a horse. It's very weird how it ran. It galloped like a horse the way it was coming across the field. And there was patches of sage grass in the field, so it would go into sage grass and I couldn't see it, and then I would see it come out and I could see the whole creature. Then it would go into some more grass. But anyway, I was sitting on this hill overlooking the right-hand corner of this fenced-in field that went into a wood line to the right. This creature come all the way down to the corner, right where I was overlooking. I didn't even need binoculars to see the creature. It was that close. And when it stopped at the fence, it stood up, took left leg, went over the fence, looked in my direction, did not see me. It looked in my direction. I was high and it was looking low. Went over the fence and I didn't see it again. It went into the woods there. And I was just like, wow. Finally seen one of these things. And it looked like this thing wasn't massive. It wasn't no 10-foot creature, nothing like that. By the edge of the fence where the tree was, by the branch that was sticking out, I measured. It was a little over 6 foot from the ground to the tree limb. So it was about 6 foot tall, but it had a massive head. Had hot legs, had a head. It looked like a giant black German Shepherd, the head did.
Wow.
The head was just huge, like about 3 times the size of a German Shepherd's head, but it looked like a black German Shepherd. The pointed ears and solid black. It was built, I couldn't tell if it was muscle built, but I could tell that it wasn't a massive creature. It was a little over 6 foot tall. So the next day, I went back and I carried my backpack, I carried my gun and my hiking gear, and I went tracking it. I was going to try to find this thing.
Yeah.
And I was by myself. I didn't feel real good about doing that, but I did. I crossed the fence where it crossed, and I went on down a pretty good ways back in there, and I found there was a game trail that went all the way back in there. Bones everywhere. Deer bones, different type of bones. I don't know what they all were. May have been a goat. I don't know. But it was bones, and no, not all of them were hanging with meat out of them or anything like that. They were just bones that had been something had eaten on them. And I followed it all the way around to a bluff, and the bluff was probably 60, 70 foot tall, but underneath the bluff, something had dug out a den up under this bluff. And it was up under there. It was, maybe 2 or 3, 4 foot deep, wide, where I could have probably crawled in there, but you could see tracks where it was going up under that bluff. And it may have been an opening under there, a cave. I don't know what it was. I wasn't about to find out. I wasn't going to crawl in there. But I looked around in the area and like I said, I didn't see it. I just seen the bones. I seen plenty of tracks where it was going up under there. Either it or another one or several of them were living in there. And I kind of sat away from it about 50, 60 yards up behind a bunch of big trees that were on the ground. And I sat over there for 2 or 3 hours hoping I'd see one of them come in or come out, and I never did see anything. So I went on back toward the truck. It was getting close to dark, and went back again the next day, and the guy who owned the farm went over and told him what I'd found and what I'd seen, and he was kind of startled. I said, I would suggest, don't have your kids out here playing at night or around this area. And I don't know if these things, I'm sure they possibly are dangerous. They killed your goats. So a day or so later, I was back over there again. I brought some stuff I was going to do to try to film this thing if I could. And I actually had put a trail camera up in front of that area that had went in up under the bluff. And I was coming out and getting in my truck, and a game and fish, State Virginia game and fish guy was coming across the creek, and he pulled up there next to my truck, and he said, "What are you doing up here?" And I said, "This gentleman over here told me I could come up here and scout out and do whatever I needed to do." I didn't want to tell him what I was doing. I'm looking for a dog man, but couldn't tell the man. He asked me what I was doing, and I told him, and he said, "Well, you got permission to be here." I said, "Yes, sir. The gentleman over there told me I could come up here and kind of scout out, sitting in my truck." And he made me go with him to the guy's house, and the guy told him, I gave him permission to do it. And we went back, and he got my license and my driver's license and wanted to know what guns I had in the vehicle. And I told him, and he looked at them, and he was real suspicious. And he said, "I don't know why you're up here." He said, "But I can tell you one thing." He said, "There's some kind of creature around here that's killing livestock on all these farms in this area." He said, "I don't know what you're doing up here, but the best thing for you to do is probably leave and not come back."
Oh, he knew.
He knew, yeah.
Absolutely, he knew.
No doubt he knew, yeah. And
So
I said, "Well, I appreciate the advice." And I think I went up there one more time, but I never did see it again. And I checked the trail camera after a week, and nothing on the trail camera.
Nothing.
So
this leads me to asking if you can talk about the last encounter you had with. You said you saw something, you weren't really sure what it was, and you were with Martin at the time. What was that? Because I remember hearing the story, and it affected both of you pretty dramatically.
Well, it was the strangest thing I've ever seen in my entire life. I've never seen anything like that, and it's just mind-blowing. Martin's whole second book, The Beast Between the Rivers, the whole second chapter was about me and him seeing that creature in the LBL. And it was very close to where he had his encounter in 93. That's what we were in there for. It was 29 years to the date, if I remember correctly, since he had his encounter in that area. We weren't in that exact area, but we were very close. We were going there in the dark. We'd been there two or three nights and 2 or 3 days, and we were going to go back into the area that nobody had ever been into that area where he had his encounter before, except I was the first one that he took in there. And it's very private to Martin, and he has a lot of pain from that area, and it took him a long time to get over. A lot of people don't know, but Martin didn't come out with his story and tell everybody what actually happened to him until 2022. It was August of 2022 when he and I and Barton were at the first ever Dogman conference in Paris, Tennessee, which at that time Josh Turner had that conference there, first one ever. And Barton had an hour speaking, and he gave that hour to Martin. He said, please get up and tell your story to get it off your mind. You'll feel a lot better, and you'll have it off of you. And I've been trying to get him to do that for years. We both had. And he got up and told his story, and he brought the house down. It was just unbelievable, man. It was so, Martin is just so credible and such an honest, straightforward guy that, I know him like a brother. I trust him like a brother, and he's always had my back, and he feels the same about me, I'm sure. And, I don't have any doubt. Anything, if Martin told me it was snowing in July, I'd believe him. So, he's just a honorable, good guy. I mean, he's credible. Yeah. And, I remember what he went through. And, it was really difficult. He lived with this for so long. And I don't know how he did it. I came out with mine in 2014, 15. We had the very first Bigfoot group on Facebook, me and Michael Patterson. And we had the very first group on Facebook about Bigfoot. And I started telling my story in that group, and it was Blue Ridge Sasquatch and Crypto, and Michael Patterson still has that group. I'm still a member. I just mainly frequent my group, and Michael's in my group too. But, it was a little bit different. I'd gotten over mine. The ones on the river changed my whole alternative and my whole thought train. I felt completely different about these creatures. They're not all bad. Even, matter of fact, the first one that was there could have killed me, and it didn't. Mm-hmm. So it was just trying to scare me out of this area. But I didn't know that then, but I do now. But Martin told that story, and it brought the house down. It was seriously about to put a tear in my eye when he told the story, because I knew what it meant to him. But,
well, I've heard him tell that story, and he had that 93, that encounter in 93, and here it is, like 41 years later.
Well,
and
it's 30 something years later, but yeah, you're right. It's a long time to hold it in. And, he did tell me the story, parts and bits and pieces of it, but still he couldn't get it off his chest until he just opened up and told everybody in a public meeting. It just kind of cleared the air. So
yeah,
I didn't feel better. It relieved a lot of things from him, but what he was carrying.
But you can still tell through his afflection when he talks about it, regardless of where he is, that it's still like fresh in his mind.
People don't know everything about Martin, but I can tell you one thing. He's been through a lot. That affected him drastically. He lost his daughter 7-8 years ago. That was really rough on him. And, between that and telling his story, it was it was heartbreaking to watch him finally come out and kind of clear some of his conscience of what he'd been holding in for so long, and a lot of pain. But, what we've seen in LBL was absolutely incredible. I mean, when I just think the world of Small Town Monsters, and just honored to be in their movie and their film that they did with us last October, and it was out this year. There was 3 different parts on it. Elijah Henderson was in it with us, and Joe and Jesse of Helbin Holler, and my buddy Mike Smith that's had a Dogman encounter. He was in it a small part, and then Mark Newbill of Beast TV, he was in it for a minute. But they've done such a great job, Eli and Alexander and all them, and they were so good to us when we recounted the entire story that we went through. That was October of 22. I believe it was 12:38 at night, and we had been there for 2 or 3 days, and we had decided to go in that night. We were going to park the truck and walk into this area where Martin had his original encounter in 93 in the dark. And we had stopped on if you don't know the LBL, in case you haven't been there, it's 170,000 acres of nothing but pure rural area unless you're in a campground. And you can get back into especially the north end, you get back in there after you get off what's called the trace, which is the main drive that goes in there. There's thousands of roads off to the left, to the right, to the back, and there's gravel roads, there's dirt roads, they go everywhere. And if you don't know your way around that area back in there, you could very easily run out of gas trying to find your way out of there. And, I can't mention the area that we were in, but it's an area that Martin has had his encounter in 93. And we had talked about it for 2 days. We're going in tonight. Let's do it. Let's go in. We'll park the truck and we'll walk in. It's probably a mile walk back into there. We'll just go in the dark. We'll have a better chance to have some type of reaction from something. And we'd already been in there the day before in the daytime. Not all the way in, but to the left, and there was Bigfoot on the hill, and they were making all kinds of noises at us. And I have a type of ability somehow where they seem to find me, and Martin has an ability where Dogman seems to find him. I know that sounds crazy, but it's true. And it was when we pulled into this area, we had just stopped and had a snack at like 12 o'clock at night. Lowered his tailgate on his truck, went back there and had a snack because we hadn't eaten since early that morning. And we were going to park, make a little turn there on a dirt road and park the truck and walk back in there. Well, we got back in the truck after we had eaten. We had just turned. Now, you can't go fast on these roads.
Right.
If you know the area I'm talking about, when you're talking about a dirt or gravel road, I mean, you might do 2 or 3 miles an hour. If you want to go flying down that road, you're probably going to end up off in a ditch or down in a gully somewhere. So you got to be a little careful going back in there in certain areas. And we had just turned the curve, barely going, just enough. And I have my window down on the passenger side. Martin's driving. And I look to the right, and there's a creek bed to the right. There's a dry creek bed. There's a culvert. This is back in there where it's really remote. There's a culvert that goes under the road right there, and right next to this culvert there's tall like grass, looks like cattails right next to it. And I look over and there's this creature laying right there. I mean, this is 5 foot for me. I could have reached out and touched this thing, and might have been 7 foot. It was so close, but I looked in and it's this blue mist. Well, it's hard to explain. This sounds absolutely crazy, but it's true. This blue-looking mist was in this area, and it was forming into a creature. And I looked over at it, and this thing went from blue to silver gray. The very tips of its fur, each tip of the fur sticking out was lit up like light in it. And it had a huge head. The head was about half the size of the truck windshield. It had mane around it like a line. It was the craziest looking thing I've ever seen, and it was just staring at me. Its eyes looked like flashlights, tiny flashlights, solid clear, looking straight at me. It was not taking its eyes off of me. And it was down in the weeds, but I could see its whole body in the weeds. And I looked back to the right, and I turned to tell Martin, and Martin says, I already see it. About that time, it did whatever it did to us, zapped us, infrasounded us, whatever you want to call it. I've had that done to me twice by Bigfoot. I've never had a dogman do it till that night. And it hit me so hard, and my chest felt like I had somebody standing on it. I had a headache, and my legs were numb and tingly. Martin was slumped over to the steering wheel. He was telling me, I can't breathe. I can't breathe. Well, it had affected him similar to what it done me, except it caused some type of allergic reaction, which caused his throat to swell together and his tongue to swell up. I thought he was going to die. I really did. I said, "Man, are you okay?" And I was shaking him. And I said, "Let me drive. Let's get us out of here." And he was trying his best to talk. And I just knew he was going to collapse from not having enough air. And we're still driving like 2 or 3 miles an hour. Well, this creature comes out of the ditch. It goes to the, I'm looking at it, and it goes to this side of the truck. It goes around the back of the truck to the left side where Martin's at, and it's walking through this field right next to us on the left side. It's looking back at us, and this thing is like a huge dog with a lion dog looking head in gray silver with the tips of its fur lit up. But at the same time, you can see through this thing. It's transparent, but it's a creature walking. And it keeps walking, and then it goes up the side of this hill, and you can hear the limbs and branches breaking as it goes up through there. And I'm worried to death about Martin, and at the same time thinking, is this thing going to come back, or another one going to jump on us over here? That this one is maybe trying to. I didn't really know what to do, but I was more worried about Martin than I was anything. And we finally got off that road. Him slumped over the steering wheel. This thing had put some kind of the worst smell in the world inside of the truck. Some kind, whatever it did, and it put some kind of film over the truck, like some kind of spray on the paint. I think had 3 people buff it out to try to get all that off, and I think there's still some of there on it, still on it today. But by the time we got off of that road and got to, we were probably 3 miles from there. We found a public restroom in the middle of the park that had a light, a street light above it. And we pulled up there, and I just got Martin out, and he was walking around. I got him some water. He was feeling a little better, but he was still having a hard time breathing and talking. And he was really sick, real sick in his stomach. And he was sick for a week. He was literally sick for a week. I was okay. I was pretty good, okay, by the next morning. I didn't feel 100%, but mine went over pretty quick. But he was sick for over a week. So I've never seen anything like that. It doesn't even sound possible. But the other 2 dog creatures I seen looked like flesh and blood.
Yeah.
I don't know what this thing was. It was definitely a dog man type creature. I don't know if it was some type of mixture or what it was, but it was definitely the weirdest thing that I've ever seen in my life. And I still today can't understand how you can see a creature walking and looking back at you and you can see through it.
Right.
I don't know, but the documentary we done with Small Town Monsters, we went back to the location, the exact area, told the entire story, what happened, and did 2 or 3 other things with them too. But it was definitely not like any experience I'd ever had before. I'd say everything I'd ever dealt with was completely flesh and blood type creature. I don't know if this thing was a combination of that and something else. I'm really not sure.
Oh, I don't have any answers for that, because whenever I encounter something, I try to put it in boxes, and that's just the military, security, police, correctional officer,
Right.
and being raised around military guys.
Right.
I try to rationalize everything, and I try to put things in boxes, and if I can't put it in a box, that just leads me to believe, what my instincts are. So, but got a couple things for you. So you and I, we know a couple of people. Well, I'll ask you a couple questions about a couple of people. So, Josh Smith, the host of Mysteries Unknown, what are your thoughts about him and his podcast?
To be honest with you, I've been, like I said before, I'm not by any means mean to be bragging by this at all, but I've been on so many podcasts and radio shows over the years. I don't even know how many I've been on, but I know for a fact that, some you just enjoy more than you do others. And I don't know why that is. I guess that's true with anything you do. I really enjoyed being on Josh's show. I thought he was very professional. I liked the questions he had. I liked his attitude. I think he's got a really good show, and I hope he continues to grow and do better.
Awesome. And then another one is a friend of yours and a friend of mine, Harley Owens.
Harley, I haven't known Harley a long time. He's followed me for a long time. Scott Carpenter was a good friend of mine. Harley got involved in some of Scott's research areas up in East Tennessee, and he done a astounding job. He got out and got some pretty good, reliable photographs and everything else. And I'm a little bit concerned about him. I think the world of Harley. He's just a young guy. I think he's 20 years old or something like that. And
Yeah.
it's great to see somebody his age, being able to follow in our footsteps to carry on where we've went. And I think that, I'm getting older now myself, and I can't do this forever, but I enjoy doing what I do. I don't research as much as I did with Bigfoot. As I think I pretty much run my string with Bigfoot. I've done about everything I feel like I could do with Bigfoot that I want to do, and Harley, I just hope continues. I worry about him. He gets a little discouraged because he's got several people that are on him, and I've told him several times. I said, Harley, let me tell you something. It's there's always going to be those people that are naysayers and don't believe a thing you say. I'm at the point where I've been to this point a long time. I don't care what anybody believes.
Mm-hmm.
I know what I've seen. I know what I've done. I know what I've witnessed, and I know what I've experienced. And if you don't believe me, I don't care.
Yeah.
I know what I've done and seen, and some of my teammates too. So I have no reason to come on here and make up some story. I mean, it's what we've done and what we've been around. So
Yeah.
believe me, you don't make any money at this field. I haven't anyway. I mean, you may be able to after you get enough subscribers or something, but
Right.
I can assure you, I'm just now starting my first book, and Martin's on his third, Barton's on his fifth, Ron Moorhead's on his fourth, and I just never took time to do it. But I mean, that'd be probably the only thing I'd get paid to speak at conferences. But it's time you break down what it costs to get there and everything else that you do. This is not a money making field. So
No.
if
It's a labor of love.
if somebody can tell me how you can get rich talking about Bigfoot and Dogman, let me know.
Yeah. With Harley, guys like you that are getting up there and really aren't going to be able to get out there and really get into the nitty gritty of things. Scott Carpenter left a legacy, and it's great to see someone like Harley pick up that mantle and continue on his legacy, whether or not he knew Scott personally or knew him very well, but he understood Scott's research and he's out there doing it, pretty much. I there's been times where every single day hey man, I'm out right now. And it's been like 5, 6, 7, 8, 10 days in a row he's out looking. So
he'll call me. It may be 10 o'clock at night.
Yeah.
I just call his Harley. What do you think? What do you think about this? Or what do you think about that? Or, he's had some pretty crazy encounters with Dogman following him. And I told him, I said, you got to be careful with these creatures. All these things aren't friendly. And, if you let them know, I learned even with, I had a 2 rogue or maybe 3 rogue Bigfoot attack my farm in 2020. And they literally terrorized me for 3 months or a little longer and scared my horses to death. And, I didn't do anything to cause these creatures to do that. I never did anything to harm them or bother them or anything. I don't know why they did it. I never have figured out why they did it. But I surely didn't do anything to harm any of them and wouldn't unless they harmed me. Self-defense would be the only way I'd harm any of them. But, I told Harley, I said, man, you got to be careful with these creatures because Scott Carpenter would be the first to tell you if he was here. There was plenty of times when he was fearful because I truly today believe that Scott was zapped so many times, Scott Carpenter was, that it may have had something to do with the aneurysm he had in his head.
Yeah.
I don't know that, but I mean, it's a very good possibility that it could, because we were at the Gatlinburg conference the weekend of his passing.
Yeah.
Martin Groves, Martin Nunley, and I were all at the Gatlinburg conference that year. And we were going to meet up with Scott.
Yeah.
And, he was just a wealth of knowledge. I can't say enough about him. I just hope Harley can overlook the criticism and the non-believers and the people who want to just do nothing but stir up trouble and not give somebody a chance.
Yeah.
I hope he can do that, and I hope he'll try to do it in a safe way too. I tell him that all the time. And
yeah, Harley's legit.
Go ahead. I'm sorry.
Harley is legit. Like here's the thing. He's putting in the time and the energy, and he's shown me some amazing pictures, and I'm telling you, he's legit. So,
I don't have any problem. Or supposedly, we're talking to Harley privately. I'm sure Harley. I'm not going to mention names, but there's a couple of podcasters that's pretty much beat him up and run him down, and it's got him down right now. And I understand that will get you down. Anytime somebody criticizes you, and you're a real person and you're doing the real thing out there, it's hard enough to do this anyway. To spend nights and days in the woods. I've spent 9-10 nights and days in the woods by myself.
Yeah.
And I wouldn't do it now, but when I was younger, I did it, and I wouldn't suggest anybody do it by themselves. And I tell Harley that. Go with somebody out there with you. Carry a personal beacon if something happens where you can get help. Because, there is a such thing called Missing 411 by David Pilatus, Can-Am. And there's lots of people that go in the woods and nobody ever sees them again. So something's happening out there. So you need to try to, cut down the precautions of the chances of anything happening to you. So I hope Harley would do that, and I hope he'll continue to research like he has. I do think he's a fine young man, and I think that he's got a lot of possibilities to go far.
Absolutely. Well, with that being said, Mr. Denton, I am truly, truly grateful for you coming on my show, and
I'm just honored to be here. Glad to be a part.
I appreciate it. Is there any parting words that you have?
Well, be open-minded. Don't give your friend or family member a chance, because a lot of people see creatures. I'm sure we don't even know all the people that have seen things. They don't get on Facebook and they don't get on podcasts. And some of these people are older and they've seen some incredible things that we'll never hear about. But always be open-minded to your friend or neighbor when he thinks he's seen something, and not be critical toward them or criticize them. Try to understand and listen. Be open-minded. So, and don't go in the woods by yourself. If you're going to research and you want to do that, take somebody with you. Don't go by yourself. You're a lot better off. You're a lot safer doing that. And anybody that's not a member of my group, Bigfoot Believers and Other Creatures, I'd sure appreciate you joining. And my best friend Martin Groves' new book is coming out any day now. It's Beast Between the Rivers 3. Ron Moorhead's new book is absolutely incredible. He's a very close friend of mine, and Martin Nunley's out there he's doing a great job. He's filming everything in the LBL right now, so he's got some pretty incredible stuff. That he and Martin and I were there in March when first time I'd ever seen one of these things. We actually seen one of those crawlers, and I've never seen one. So,
after the show, I'll tell you just a couple of quick things. All right.
All right.
So everybody,
I
want to say, hey, I appreciate you being on. Everybody out there,
everybody for listening. Thank you very much for listening.
Absolutely, thank you. So everybody out there, thanks for watching. Thanks for joining the show. This very special episode of the Cryptid Podcast. If you or anybody you know have had any encounters, something strange you just can't put your mind around it, can't put it in a box, then email me at thecryptidpodcast@gmail.com. Thecryptidpodcast@gmail.com. Love to hear your story, and hopefully, if you'd like to share, have you on the show. All right, everybody. Hope you have a wonderful night. Thanks for watching. And as my buddy Josh always says, stay prayed up and always remember, a legend begins with a sighting.
I got a strange going on out here. Something just killed my dog.
Something killed your dog?